Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
Let's say you're looking for some new administrative staff, maybe potential manager material or somebody who's going to be a great treatment coordinator or something along these lines. And you want somebody who's a hard worker, that's ambitious and competent. So you place an ad and you offer, let's say, a competitive wage or a really good wage for your area versus other dental practices. And at the same time you place your ad, a big company like Walmart or Target or some other big corporation places an ad paying a similar amount of money for this entry-level type position. It could be any big company. Well, which one do you think that super competent go-getter person is going to pick? Well, 9 times out of 10, they're calling Walmart or the other big company. Well, why? Well, that's what I want to talk about in this week's episode. Why you lose out on these opportunities. We're also going to discuss how to attract and keep great team members, along with what you may be doing that's keeping you from doing so. My name is Jeff Blumberg, and I'm your host. And I think the best place to start is by answering the question I just asked. Why? Why are they picking the big company over your dental practice? What's the real reason behind it? You might think, well, the employment market's tight. You've been hearing about how low unemployment has been. Well, truthfully, and I went over this in a couple episodes ago, it was a longer episode on the state of the dental industry. A couple of interesting factoids, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but unemployment right now is at around 4%, which is, close to pre-pandemic levels, pre-COVID levels. But the interesting thing is in the last year, from March to March, close to 1.4 million full-time jobs have been lost and close to 1.9 million part-time jobs have been created. We also have more two-job holders, where a person has a part-time and a full-time job, than any time on the graph that you get from the Federal Reserve, which I think goes back to 2010 or something like that. So we have less people with full-time jobs, and we have more people with part-time jobs and more people with two jobs. So the job market is not as harsh as you might think it is. So if you think that's the reason why you're not finding these great employees, that is not the reason. They are out there. Now, I should also add, if you're talking about hygienists and dental assistants, there are issues there. It isn't the same thing from that perspective. And I went into this in that episode. I won't get into it again, but those are a little harder to find right now than maybe they were 5, 10, 15 years ago. But as far as administrative personnel, they are not harder to find right now. The real reason this, ambitious, competent prospect who's looking for upward mobility is picking the big company is because it offers them a career. They're looking for a career. Someone who's hungry wants a career. They're going to go with a company that they know has that potential. They can get free training. There's tons of potential upside. They can start working this year, and 6 to 10 years from now, they might be making 6 figures, right? And if it's a good fit, this might be where they work for the rest of their life. So really what we're talking about is the ad you placed offered a job. The other ad offered the potential for a career. And, what's the difference? A career is, a profession that you train for, which is a permanent calling, right? A career in law, a career in dentistry, a career in medicine. Whereas a job is a regular position that pays you to be there. And through life, people have lots of quote unquote jobs. They usually have one career, maybe 2. That's why it's a big deal when somebody changes career. If someone if they're in IT, and they may have different IT jobs, but their career is still IT. That's their calling, right? And you see this in dentistry to a degree in the technical aspects of dentistry, with associates, with hygienists, dental assistants, right? But there needs to be room for growth there too. If you hire an associate and this person's just dynamite, eventually they're going to want some degree of partnership, somewhere where they can hang their hat permanently, or they're going to be looking to open up on their own eventually. There's the anomaly once in a while who's a great dentist who just wants to be a dentist and doesn't want to do anything else for the rest of their life. But, a lot of them are looking for more. Potentially, it doesn't have to be now, could be 10 years from now, but that's where they're going, a lot of these folks, right? Maybe not as much as they used to, but it's still there. Same thing with a hygienist. I've met a lot of hygienists actually on the MGE program who are now managers. They did hygiene for 10, 12 years. They felt like they got everything they wanted out of it, and they wanted to move up within the organization. Maybe that dental assistant you have wants to become a hygienist or become an EFTA or something like this. So the real question in your office, especially with administrative personnel, managers, treatment coordinators, things like this, is how do you create a career type environment in your practice? And the funny thing about this, if you're an owner or an office manager, more for the ownership though, believe it or not, this specifically applies to you because you're the one who's going to set the tempo on whether this is a possibility in your business or not. Because what is it that you have to, what's the environment you have to create if you want to have a career type environment? So let's say I'm somebody who comes from another industry. Maybe I have no dental experience, but I'm looking for a place, or an office or a business that I can stick with for a long time and actually move up within the business. Well, you have to have the ability for me to do that. If you have an $80,000 a month practice or $100,000 a month practice and you never want to grow it any further than that, and you don't want additional locations or whatever, I'm going to top out pretty quick. You see, because you're not going to have much more to offer me at that point. If you already have somebody who's your manager, well then, even if I were comparing dental office to dental office, if I talk to another dentist and they're expanding to 2 other offices and I can come in on an entry level type, position where I'm the schedule coordinator, let's say, and as they open up office 2 or 3, I could be the potential manager in that office. Well, that offers advancement to me. Whereas if this is all we got and you're really not interested in expanding, unless I want to be a schedule coordinator for the rest of my life or until I find something better, I'm probably not taking the job. You see? So this starts with ownership. This is where this starts. What are the long-term goals for your business? Because if the goals don't include growth and room for advancement and the potential to train in order to advance, you're going to lose out on an ambitious prospect who wants more, who wants to be able to grow. So this is really a question, if you own a practice, that you have to ask yourself, do you want to grow? And I find, most of the doctors I talk to do, and maybe they did, and then they had a lot of losses and no longer do, think it's not possible. In that other episode, I also went over the amazing amount of opportunity there is right now in the dental industry. So if you ever wanted to be entrepreneurial and have multiple offices or a really large office or, put offices in a place where there are no other offices, there's lots of places like that right now. So there is a lot of opportunity. So if you're of the mind that I want to grow, I want to expand, I want a big booming business, I want multiple practices, this is your game. This is a great time to do it. And if you have that mindset, you will attract people who are looking for that type of an environment where they can grow with you and help you to grow. And so you have those basic components. There has to be room for growth and there has to be some method in order to get trained. We have lots of clients, for instance, that maybe they were doing 50 when they got here and now do 800 a month, and they've got 42 employees and they had 4 when they first came in. You see, and the people who manage areas of the practice now started off as a no experience receptionist, but then they got trained, they became more competent, they became more capable, and they moved up within the organization as they took more and more responsibility. But that environment was conducive to getting people like that. They could see, they could see that there was potential for it. So really what you need, if you want to attract those ambitious people, there has to be room for growth and you have to be able to train people. Now let's talk about training for a second, because this is usually where this falls down, right? I think people want to grow for the most part. Not everybody does, but they want to grow. But then the idea of how do I train people is where you get into trouble. And really training boils down to a couple things. One, you have to have your internal training systems where you can bring people in and onboard them and train them on the basics in your practice, on your employee manuals and things like this. And then there's CE type training where they learn how to do their jobs even better. I might have a treatment coordinator training program that teaches them how to do the basics, how to deal with the software and how to do a treatment plan and estimate insurance coverage. But then I might have further training which really teaches them how to close and sell very well. And to that end, if you're going to do training, you as the owner also have to see the value in it. And I say this only because if you own a dental practice, whether you like it or not, or you know it or not, you're essentially wearing 3 hats, okay? And one of them is the doctor hat. The other is the salesperson hat, where you have to close people. And the other is the executive hat by virtue of the fact that you run a business. Now, the funny thing is, if you look at any job in any business, it has a specific required either duties and there's an expected outcome. right? Expected results. So if we had a schedule coordinator, for instance, just by the name alone, we have a schedule coordinator in a dental practice. What would be your expectations of a schedule coordinator if you hired one? Well, you would expect them, most people say, well, I expect them to schedule people. You probably expect them to do more than that. You would expect a productive schedule, an efficiently done schedule, a schedule done in accordance with the policy. You don't just want a full schedule because you can have a full schedule with nothing on it, right? But that's the expected result that you want from this schedule coordinator. Well, the same thing applies to you as the doctor owner. What would you expect of a doctor? A properly executed treatment plan done at a high standard of care, done in a proper amount of time. Well, what would you expect of a salesperson? You'd expect closes. You'd expect income. And what would you expect of an executive? You'd expect an expanding business, a profitable business, a growing business, a trained staff, and so on. So the funny thing is about all of this, and we say this all the time, but if you're hearing it for the first time, just let this sink in. If you look at where you are trained as a doctor owner, you went to dental school, you've done CE. So therefore you have no problem producing the expected outcome of a dentist, right? You can get a patient well, you can execute a treatment plan properly. Well, that's because you learned how to do it. But then the areas that you might be having trouble with, whether it's management, which would include staff management, financial management, things like this, or sales, getting patients to say yes and accept full treatment plans, usually that goes back to it's not because you don't have a knack for it. I mean, who knows if I have a knack for dentistry? You wouldn't let me loose on a patient. I didn't go to dental school. I don't have a license. Maybe you think you'd have a knack for it. That's not it. It's that you're not trained on how to do it. You don't know the methodology involved with producing that specific outcome. And you're not going to learn that methodology from reading a magazine article. I'm sorry. Or listening to a 10-minute video. You need to get trained on these things. So you yourself as the owner have to value training if you're going to require other people to train. Because it's almost like if I had a doctor, a dentist I saw, and let's say he's telling me I need, an implant and 2 crowns, and I look and his front 2 teeth are rotting out of his mouth and his breath smells terrible and he's missing 5 teeth. I wouldn't really buy into what this fellow is saying because he obviously doesn't care enough about himself to be able to do a good job on me. So if you're going to require other people to train or expect other people to train or create an environment where training is important, it also has to be important to you. But that's why companies like us exist. You look at the average doctor, they went to dental school, they know how to be a dentist, but they don't know how to be an executive or a salesperson. So you get companies like MGE, like us, and we do training in those areas. You've probably heard of the MGE Power Program. I'll put a link to it on the episode webpage. This is where we teach a doctor how to do these things. And that's where those, amazing results come from because now you have a doctor who knows how to be a doctor as well as a salesperson, as well as an executive, right? So you first have to want to create an environment. You have to think training's valuable and create an environment where there's room for growth, which means that your business, you have to have a desire and a willingness to grow. If you don't have that, you're not going to get on a consistent level, at least, ambitious people. So assuming you have that and you're willing to train and you do training yourself, and then you bring people in, the next component is they now have to get trained. But the funny thing about this is I have a funny viewpoint on this. I will never force somebody to get trained. Never. Because in my view, training is a reward, right? Training is a benefit. We have the MGE Office Manager Training Program, which is part of the MGE Power Program. Very extensive training on sales, management, etc. But with that program, and it's in the Power Program link if you want to look at it. But in that program, let's say we have an office manager who does their training and they work for a doctor in Illinois. And then for whatever reason, after 10 years working for this doc, they have to move to Arizona. Well, normally that manager will put the fact that they're an MGE Office Manager Training Program graduate on their resume, and that puts them into being in demand. That's a very in-demand thing. Maybe you've encountered this before, maybe you haven't, but it's, if you see that on a resume, this person is usually, maybe you do, maybe you don't, this person is usually a quality manager. They're pretty committed. They spend a lot of time getting trained. So training was a reward. It helped me or helped the doctor in Illinois who trained this office manager for 10 years when they were doing a good job, but also it helped the office manager by giving them skills to become more effective and also possibly to command higher salaries, and it made them more likely to get hired. So training is a reward. If you have to convince people, cajole people, beg people to get trained, I'm just telling you my personal viewpoint on it. I wouldn't bother. Obviously there's the basic training that you would expect somebody to have to do the job. If they're not willing to do that, like here's how you answer the phone and they're just not interested, well, that's just not going to work. Let's be real, right? But assuming you want the person to learn more, maybe this is a potential person who's going to be an executive or something along these lines. You want somebody who wants to learn more. You want somebody who's hungry for these things. You want somebody who's ambitious. And assuming I have an environment like that and I have that training available for these folks, well, then I'll have people move up within the ranks of the organization. Again, this is a model a lot of our clients use. Clients who have multiple practices. They'll have a large practice that they built up with their manager and their trained staff and themselves. And then they're looking at eyeing office number 2, and maybe they have this person that they trained up to be sort of a junior executive in the big practice. That person is targeted as the office manager for practice number 2. And they do the same thing with an associate, and they invest some time into training this person. And, I know one of the arguments on this is if you spend money training somebody and then they leave, you lost the money or whatever. So, what I would do, and I'm not saying this is even possible, it really depends on where you practice or whatever, but if I was going to invest, whether this could be anything, it doesn't just have to be MGE training, but let's say I was going to train a manager or a treatment coordinator, or even let's say I was going to help a dental assistant go learn to become an EFTA. Or I had a dental assistant who went on to become a hygienist. Let's say I had a dental assistant who worked for me for 10 years. They wanted to go become a hygienist and work for me part-time while they were in hygiene school. And they want me to help pay for hygiene school or something like this. Well, the only thing I would ask is that they commit for a certain length of time. I'd probably have my lawyer draw something up, or they owe me the money back or something along these lines. There's a point, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, however long, where it was worth it having that person. And again, if you have a great environment, they'll just stick around anyway. Same thing with an associate. What if I'm sending them to an FMR course or an implant course? Because that's usually everybody's big nightmare. I'm going to send an associate to this $26,000 implant course. We're going to learn to do all kinds of crazy implants, and they're just going to quit and open their own practice or something like this. Well, then you should have some type of a written agreement that if you're going to front the money for that, or make that a benefit of their training, or rather of their employment, that they're going to work for you for a certain length of time after they've done the training. And I'm sure that something, look, maybe not sure is the wrong word, but I'm pretty sure that your attorney could draw something up like that in that regard. But then again, let's play that scenario forward. So let's say I have an associate doctor, and part of the benefits this person's getting when they come to work for me is after they've worked for me for a time and really proved their mettle, I'm willing to invest in training them, beyond basic training, right? I'm going to train them to sell, and I'm going to train them on some basic things, which, we have things we have the MGE program where the power program I told you about. We also have our online platform, DDS Success, where we do a lot of the basic training for people like treatment coordinator training, scheduling training, things like this, right? Let's say I'm going to do the basic training with them, but then they want to get more advanced clinical training. Well, if they work for me for a certain length of time and they've met a certain level of productivity, well, I'll pay for it if they agree to work for me for at least another 2-3 years. So now I have this associate, they sign an agreement that now has gone to an implant course, and now they can place implants and they can do all on X's, and they're making more money and I'm making more money, and it all worked out, right? Same thing with any other employee that you had. Plus, it's very attractive for the person coming in knowing, hey, that's a potential benefit for me down the line. But then in addition to not begging somebody to train, that's one thing that's important, someone actually has to warrant or deserve training, further training. There's training for your job, your basic training. But if I'm going to invest days and days and thousands of dollars on somebody, or in somebody rather, to get trained, they actually have to prove to me that they're worth it. Now, what do I mean by that? There's nothing weird here. Basically, it means that they have to be a productive employee. If the person's not a productive employee, I'm never going to spend tons and tons of money to try to make them a productive employee. Because with minimal to no training, they should at least be contributing to the business. If they're not contributing to the business, I'm not going to throw good money after bad and spend more money on this person. If I've seen people do this. The reason I bring this up, where someone's considering firing somebody, a new employee, and they're like, well, I sent him to you to get trained. I'm like, why are you doing that? That's a complete waste of your money. Give this to somebody who actually deserves it, who's done a lot for your practice, because the reason you're offering this training and this room for advancement is these folks are supposed to help you grow that business. If you've ever tried to grow your business before and it didn't work out, or you ran into trouble with it and you attributed not having great staff to part of the problem, right? Well, in a way, you're partially right in the sense that great staff will help you grow the business. If they help you grow the business, well, then they warrant the reward of training, more pay, and things along those lines. But again, you have to want to grow the business in the first place, especially for further training. But what this also, brings up is, you have to have basic things in place. You have to want to grow. You have to have the ability to train. You have to have room for advancement. I would also recommend that you should also have basic training materials in place to train people for their jobs. As I mentioned, we have some of that stuff on DDS Success. I'll put the link to it on the episode webpage. But, I'm talking about onboarding checklists and basic video training on how to answer your phone and manuals and things like this. And usually when I talk to somebody about this, this is when I get the glazed eye look because, they have maybe these manuals that they bought or they have, and they don't have the million hours it's going to take to edit these things to make them perfect or something along these lines. So what happens is instead of doing something, the person just becomes apathetic and does nothing. That is absolutely the wrong thing to do. This is with training materials. This is the case where something is better than nothing. Okay. Something is better than nothing. If all you had was a checklist that every new employee followed when they were onboarded and one of those, semi-lame employee manuals that tells them when payday is and what your policy is on this or that or whatever, that's better than nothing. If you had 2 videos, one how to answer the phone and 2 how to greet a patient, that's all you had. That's better than no videos. So the thing I would encourage you to do for your basic internal training methods, the stuff that, because, someone could do the DDS Success course, for example, on how to the schedule coordinator course, the treatment coordinator course, and they'll know a lot. They're not going to know how to do it in your practice. Exactly, because you're going to have your own peculiarities with your practice. So you're going to have some policy that's specifically applicable to your practice. When we made those videos, I don't know what your hours are. I can suggest scheduling policy, but it may not match yours exactly. I don't know what software you use, you see? So you have to have policies like that in the practice. And like I said, this is a case where doing something is better than nothing. So here would be my recommendation. Start with, if you're in the hiring process or you're in the hiring mode, have a basic checklist every new employee follows to get oriented to their new job. Find their cubby, know where to store their stuff. They know the office phone policy, things like this. And then what I would start doing is anytime you're training a new employee, start videoing it. You can get one of these cheap little tripods from Amazon that you hook an iPhone up to, and iPhones now take incredible video quality. The only trick is audio. You might want to I had Dan Brown, who's one of our consultants here on months ago. His main area of specialty is marketing, and there's these Bluetooth mics. He brought up how to use it or whatever, but it's amazing the difference you see with it. You get a little Bluetooth mic, you hook up with your iPhone, because usually the audio gets bad when you're recording with an iPhone from far away. But you put a Bluetooth mic on the person doing the training, and you just video it. Here's how you answer the phone. Okay, good. Here's how you do this. Here's how you do that. The real basic stuff. You can even video, here's how you clean the plaster trap. Here's how you do this. And that helps you in a couple different ways. Number one, doing a video is a lot faster than writing something just because we're talking, right? And number two, someone can always take your video and turn it into a written policy later. That's the beauty of it. So you might have a video on how to do this, how to clean it up, right? Which is good because it offers visual assistance as well. People can see what you do when you're cleaning an operatory to turn it over for next patient. But then you can also have a written policy that follows that up. So I would encourage you for internal training stuff, the basics of a job. You can use things like DDS Success. Obviously, I would definitely suggest if you have a manager, they get it trained in MGE. We also do treatment coordinators as well as other positions in the practice. But for your basic stuff that's specific to your office, start with something, okay? Start with something. It is truly better than nothing. Don't be embarrassed about the something that you start with. Do something, okay? So essentially, this was sort of a higher level look at potential hiring issues you may be having and what you might want to change. If you're looking for those ambitious, hungry people who really want more, which a lot of us are looking for those types of employees. Well, you have to have an environment where it's conducive to get more. There has to be room for growth. There has to be training materials. There has to be the ability to train, to learn in order to advance. Okay. And like I said, these are things this is why companies like us exist. We can help you with these things. If you have any questions about this type of a thing, how do I set up a training program, things like this, you can always call us here at MGE at 800-640-1140 or find us online at mgeonline.com. Other than that, folks, that's all I have for you this week. I hope it helped. Definitely think about it. Really consider this for yourself. What is the long-term goal with your business, right? And otherwise, have a great week, and we will see you at the next episode.